So before we get to our text, which is going to be Philippians 1:27 through 30, just do a little bit of context gathering here. At the start, he talks about who he is. He talks about who's with him so that they know, okay, this is the real deal. He calls them the saints who are at Philippi, which most of them might not have felt like saints as we would think of saints today, but the saints were the believers. They were called the saints. It wasn't the people who we, make statues of and put on top of buildings and things like that. But saints were believers, the true believers who were part of the kingdom. He talks about how he prays for them and he encourages them and says, I pray for you constantly. I thank my God in all my remembrance of you, always in every prayer line, making my prayer with joy. Why? Because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now. He says, even now, some 10 years after this church was planted, you still partner with me to reach people, to share the gospel, to advance it, even in one of the hardest areas in the world at that time, which was Rome, which was a huge, obviously Imperial Rome dominated the, just about every landscape you could think of, whether it's just geographically, whether it's politically. Rome was the center of everything. All roads lead to Rome, and things like that. So he's praying for them constantly, and he's joyous because they have partnered with him this entire time. And he says, I'm sure of this, that he who began a good work in you will bring it to completion. He says, God's not done yet. He'll bring it to completion at some day, but he's not done yet. So keep going, keep doing your thing. And he just keeps encouraging them. He says, my imprisonment has even served to advance the gospel. I'm here in chains in Rome, and yet the gospel still advances. It's become known throughout the whole imperial guard that my imprisonment is for Christ. That I'm here, put here, because of Christ and for the advancement of the gospel. He says, even chains are not going to stop me from proclaiming the gospel. I love that about Paul. Read through Acts, read through the 3 or 4 times that Paul recounts his testimony, especially the one before Agrippa, King Agrippa. It's just cool. Just the way he says it, he's in chains, and he's like, I wish you would be just as I am, except for these chains. I wish you would become just as I am. And that's his hope for everyone. Every time he shares the gospel, he says, become as I am, as I pursue Christ. He talks more about the advancement of the gospel, that even despite his imprisonment, not only he is encouraged, but the brothers around him are encouraged as well. That they have actually become more bold to share the gospel. Hey, our guy, Paul, is in prison. This is an apostle. He's in prison. Today, if a pastor goes to prison, how many people are going to be like, yeah, that's really encouraging. I'm really excited my pastor went to jail. No, probably not going to happen. We're going to be like, oh, what are we going to do now? Who's going to step up? How are we going to cover this up? Or how are we going to hide this so that it doesn't become a huge story or whatever, depending on what it is. In today's society, in America, most pastors aren't going to get put in jail for proclaiming the gospel. It's a free country, as they say. It may be getting a little more less free. The more we think about it, the more life continues on. But at this point, most pastors are not going to go to jail for proclaiming the gospel. In other parts of the world, that is just not the case. It happens on a regular and frequent basis. But for us, the idea of the encouragement, the advancement of the gospel actually happening, the emboldening of the brotherhood happening by the imprisonment of an apostle just seems a little counterintuitive. It just doesn't seem right. He says the gospel is advancing. It's being proclaimed. If it's in pretense or if it's in truth, I don't care. It's happening. The name of Jesus Christ is being exalted and moved forward. It's advancing even in Rome. And he is rejoicing in that. And he talks also of his excitement at being able to see them soon. He expects that he will be released at some point in time soon. As far as we can tell, that doesn't happen. We don't see him connecting with the Philippian church again face to face. He sends people to them, and people come back and provide him with gifts and things to help his ministry. But he is still expected to see them. He's looking forward to it. 3 or 4 years after he writes this, he is actually is when he is killed. And yet he is excited and he is hopeful all the while that he will be able to see this church. And I love that. in some of the great lines he says is, for me to live is Christ and to die is gain. It's like, whichever, whether I live or whether I die, I get Christ, so it's good. Life is good. Death is good. And he even says, I'm hard-pressed between the two. My desire is to depart and be with Christ, for that is far better. But to remain here in the flesh is more necessary on your account. He says that to the Philippian church. It's more necessary for me to be here for your progress and joy in faith. He says, convinced of that, I know that I will remain, so that you might progress, so that you might advance, so that your joy might be made full in the faith. And then he gets to this really cool part in verse 27 of the first chapter. And so let me read it to you. He says, only let your manner of life be worthy of the gospel of Christ, so that whether I come and see you or am absent, I may hear of you that you are standing firm in one spirit, with one mind, striving side by side for the faith of the gospel, and not frightened in anything by your opponents. This is a clear sign to them of their destruction, but of your salvation, and that from God. For it has been granted to you that for the sake of Christ you should not only believe in him, but also suffer for his sake, engaged in the same conflict that you saw I had, and now hear that I still have. Wow. That's some powerful stuff. And even just reading those 4 verses, it's like, wow. I mean, just the manner of, just the magnitude of the way he proclaims all of this. It's beautiful to me. And so I found this text kind of fitting, because as a letter to a church, I mean, he's a pastor who's kind of away from his flock, as your pastor is away from his flock. It's kind of like, I was thinking, what does he hear of this body when he's away? When he takes time away, what are the words that are reaching back to his ears or his eyes, through things like Facebook or text messages or things like that? As he's away, what does he hear of this church? What are the things that Paul has heard of the Philippian church? And are those things similar? Or are they different? And that's something for us to all think about as church members. How, if our pastor is gone, what are the things that reach his ears about this church? Does he hear anything? I mean, hopefully he hears something, so that at least he kind of has, okay, what happened on Sunday, or what's going on throughout the week, or how are people being encouraged, or whatnot. I've been in churches before where it seems like, when the pastor's gone, Sunday is done, and his phone starts ringing. Oh, you won't believe what this guy said. Or you won't believe what they did. Or can you believe what we found in this Sunday school class, what they were teaching or what they were doing, or that they were going to get donuts instead of actually teaching or something like that. Or this, that, and the other, and it's just like nonstop complaining and complaining and complaining. Now I know with people that goes on. Things get messed up when humans get involved. That's just the way it is. But to think that the first words that are heard about your church when your pastor is gone, are they good words, encouraging words, or are they, you will not believe what happened, or you will not believe what they just did or said? Is the pastor's, when he hears it for the first time, is his first reaction to roll his eyes? You're like, here we go again? Or is it eagerness? I want to know what's happened. I want to know what's going on. I hope it's eagerness, this church. I don't know. Maybe I'll call Harry and talk to him later and see, what are you hearing? Or let me tell you some things. But I think it's important, or it just kind of fits the idea that Paul is away from his church, Harry is away from his church, and just the idea of what are the words that he actually hears. Because he says, only let your manner of life be worthy of the gospel, so that whether I come and see you or am absent, I may hear that you are standing firm in one spirit, that I may hear these good things about you, whether I actually show up or whether I don't, whether I remain absent.